If there has been one thing that I have learned about Kevin Young after his first season in charge of the BYU basketball program, it is this, that the BYU Cougars have staying power.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And as always, thank you to all of you who are everydayers right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at TurboTax. Ready for stress-free taxes, the most money back guaranteed, my friends? Head over to turbotax.com today and get matched with your expert right away. All right, let's talk BYU basketball out of the chute here and why Kevin Young should allow Cougar fans to relax a little bit. We'll also talk about a new target that has emerged on the transfer portal side of things for BYU basketball and why it's a tailor-made fit, I believe, for what BYU is looking for. Then we'll finish up today's show talking some BYU football and the latest intel on Ryder Lyons, the five-star quarterback prospect out of Folsom High School in Folsom, California. All right, so let's dive right in and talk BYU basketball. Now, I got messages via our Locked On Cougars Insider group, via DM on Twitter, and one also via email over this past weekend and change. And all of them have had a pretty common theme. And they're not the only people who have reached out. Let me be very clear about that. But the handful of them that did, the theme is very, very common in that they have been concerned about the supposed lack of action from the BYU basketball program when it comes to the transfer portal and putting together a roster for Kevin Young going into year two with him at the helm of this program. I understand there's angst about it. I understand that you want to see what the final product is going to be. I understand that you want to see if Egor Demin's going to be around for a second year. Yes, he was photographed at General Conference for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Yes, he put out a pretty cryptic social media post over the weekend that didn't really reveal anything. Yes, we are still waiting on Richie Saunders' decision on what his future holds. I say all that, and I essentially want to answer with a blanket statement, even though I think I got individual answers back to everybody who reached out, is that the answer to all of this is to relax. RELAX, that famous answer from Aaron Rodgers back in the day when with the Green Bay Packers. Why do I say that? Well, today is April 7th. 365 days ago, that's 1 year ago, BYU didn't even have a head coach at this time. What are you talking about? No, here's the deal. Kevin Young was hired at BYU on April 16th, 2024. That is still almost 2 weeks away from the 1 year anniversary of Kevin Young taking over as BYU basketball head coach. Sure, at this time last year, there were rumors involving him. There were rumors involving a number of different people out there, Mark Madsen, etc., as potential options to take over Mark Pope's program. But you consider that in less than 365 days, BYU basketball is just coming off a Sweet 16 berth. They have the number one prospect in the entire recruiting class, and AJ Dybantsa headed to campus later this month, crazily enough, because he will enroll on April 29th. I would not be too hasty and not try and get out over your proverbial skis by saying, hey, BYU hasn't put together the roster yet, because I don't think that roster is going to be complete maybe till June. Here's the simple fact of life. In this day and age of college basketball, with the transfer portal, with NIL, with the prospect of being able to bring guys over from Europe or literally worldwide international prospects, this roster is going to be in flux for a while, it feels like. But I would not worry, because I think Dominic Diomande, who is the only addition officially to BYU's recruiting class or transfer portal classes, to be more clear, BYU's in a really, really good spot because they already have really, really nice pieces returning. Keba Keita reiterated that he is going to, quote, run it back with BYU next year. That's great. You have your big man intact. You've also got guys like Brody Kozlowski, who figures to take on a more prominent role if he can translate over to being able to shoot the three at a high level and defend his position as a 3-and-D guy. There's opportunities up and down this roster for BYU to both have a nice core returning should Egor Demin and or Richie Saunders or both return to BYU basketball. But even with AJ Dybantsa coming in, Xavier Staten coming in, there is a lot to like about this BYU roster. And no, I am not concerned at this juncture that it's not complete, that it doesn't have more people committed. It doesn't have more features to it. Speaking of the BYU basketball roster, I refuse to worry about that at this point because, yet again, a year ago, BYU didn't even have Kevin Young in place, and he put together a pretty phenomenal roster in retrospect. Yes, he kept a lot of key pieces around, Dallin Hall and Richie Saunders, most notably among them. Yes, he brought in Egor Demin. Yes, he brought in Cannon Catchings, who all had roles on this team, Elijah Crawford, etc. I trust that Kevin Young, he understands what he's up against. He understands what he's going for. He understands what he's looking for, more importantly, when it comes to adding pieces to this roster. And if you're going to be concerned right now that BYU's roster isn't ready for next year, you may want to just find something else to worry about. Go and root for another team in another sport for a minute and let Kevin Young cook, because he has proven, I think, and yes, I may be a bit hasty in saying all this. I acknowledge that. But he has proven, speaking to Kevin Young, to me in a very short order, that he is in firm control of this program. He's excited to be in Provo. It affords him the opportunity to be able to watch his kids grow because he's got young children. I fully understand why he took the job at BYU, and it feels like he is locked in for the long term here. He's not here to have success for 1, 2, 3 years and then bounce back to the NBA. At least it doesn't feel like it at this juncture. Could there be an otherworldly offer that comes at some point that may persuade him to look at his options? Maybe so. But right now, Kevin Young is more than happy, more than content being in Provo, Utah, and building what he thinks could be a championship title winning squad. Yes, we're going to watch Houston and Florida play tonight for all the marbles, but Kevin Young, he wants to be right there in that national championship game before long with the BYU basketball program. And there are some people out there who believe he could very well accomplish that as soon as next year, because our friends at FanDuel over the weekend issued their early 2026 national championship odds. And where does BYU check in? Fifth place. The best, obviously, currently is Duke with plus 950. That's what FanDuel put out. Houston, who is playing for that national title tonight, is a plus 1,300. Louisville at plus 1,400. Purdue at plus 1,400. And then BYU right there at plus 1,500. Now, do they know, speaking of FanDuel, about something about Egor Demin and or Richie Saunders' potential return? Maybe they do. And maybe they're projecting that one or both of them are returning when they put these odds out there. Or it could be simply put that they believe that Kevin Young, no matter who he's got, is going to have options to put together, or at least they believe the track record's already there, where he'll put together the options available to him via the transfer portal and other means, and put together what they consider to be a national chip title winning squad. I hope that this is legitimate. I hope that BYU is capable of going out there and competing for a national title. It's been an absolutely phenomenal run to watch BYU basketball do what it's done under Kevin Young. And I don't think the good times are set to end by any means. So I understand why there may be some angst out there with regards to BYU's supposed lack of additions to this roster, especially considering the success they had. But trust that Kevin Young knows what he's doing. Trust that he's got a firm hand on the controls, and BYU will find the right options for them, and they will roll out a very, very potent and high-powered team come next season. Could this age like milk? Maybe so, but I'm figuring it's going to age like fine wine, to use that example, because I really do think Kevin Young's got a really, really smart approach to how he goes about roster building, and year one of his tenure proved that he's pretty darn good at putting it all together. All right, coming up next, we'll flip over and talk about why another prospect from the University of Washington might be just what Kevin Young and the BYU basketball program is looking for after it was revealed that BYU's been in contact with him. Who is Makai Mason, and what does he offer to BYU basketball? We'll delve into that next right here on Locked On Cougars. This message is brought to you by our friends over at TurboTax. Now, it's that time of the year, my friends. Taxes are obviously always about waiting and wondering and worrying if you're going to get any money back, and then you sit there and wait and worry some more. Now, Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. Hey, the deadline's coming soon for that filing deadline. An expert from TurboTax will give you their your taxes, their undivided attention as they work on your return, all while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day and everything else you have going on in your life. That expert will help you find every deduction possible, file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy, all so you can get the most money back guaranteed. There's no waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is taxes, and you can get an expert today at turbotax.com. To be clear, it's only available at TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates available in the iOS mobile app only, and see guarantee details at turbotax.com/guarantees. But once again, get started today with our friends over at turbotax.com. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at the Salt Lake Bees. Okay, the Salt Lake Bees, my friends, opening night at the brand new ballpark at America First Square is tomorrow night in daybreak. Join us this season for professional baseball, a family-friendly entertainment, and unforgettable memories. Opening week has got giveaways and all kinds of different contests all week long. They're making sure that fans feel the love as they come to the brand new Hive that the Bees will enjoy. Once again, opening night is tomorrow night, April 8th. Giveaways every night throughout the first homestand. Plus, enjoy fireworks and drone shows, bark in the park games, Sunday brunch, and fun theme nights all season long. Single game tickets right now are on sale. You can get tickets to as soon as tomorrow night's game by going to slbs.com and the full schedule to join the Bees this season at the ballpark at America First Square. Once again, visit slbs.com and come out to the ballpark and enjoy the brand new Hive that the Salt Lake Bees will call home. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you all are doing well out there on this Monday. All right, so over the weekend, another transfer portal target emerged for the BYU basketball program. And every one of these that seems to pop up, I look at and say, okay, why would BYU be interested in this player? Well, Makai Mason is the latest to have been rumored to be in contact with BYU. He's a junior guard, 6'5", 195 pounds, out of Gilbert, Arizona. Previously played at Rice for 2 seasons, then spent this past season playing for the University of Washington, where he endured a 13-18 campaign with Danny Sprinkle, the former Utah State head coach. So I was looking at it and saying, okay, 6'5", 195 pounds. Okay, good size for a swingman. But then I saw the number that would indicate to me why BYU has got interest in a guy like Makai Mason. You look at his stat line, he played 31 games this past year. 24.4 points was actually the lowest of his career so far because he averaged nearly 30 minutes a game both seasons he played at Rice down there in Texas. But then you look at his percentages shooting this past season. He shot 42.5% from the field, but more importantly, 40.2% from three and shot at volume. He had 132 attempts. So shoot 40% from three on 132 attempts. That right there, everybody, is why BYU basketball has interest in Makai Mason, because he can shoot the three ball and he can shoot it at a high level. Yes, if you look at his previous numbers, though, the three ball has been up and down for him. He shot 37.5% as a freshman in 2022-2023 for Rice, dipped to 34.3% as he played a career high in minutes and obviously scored a career high in points in 23-24 for the Owls. But then he took a little more of a backup role, or I guess a downgraded role with Washington this past year, and those numbers went up. So there's a lot to like about what Makai Mason brings here. He also shot a career high in free throws at 71%. I look at this, and he averaged 9.9 points, which matches his output from his freshman campaign. He at one point averaged 14 points per game for Rice, his second season for the Owls. But I think this is exactly what BYU needs, is guys like Makai Mason, because he has to have proven, I think, on tape that he took a little more of a step back in terms of his overall role with Washington this year, but the numbers improved. His shot selection, I would figure, improved as well. And the fact that he didn't have to be the premier guy and obviously be more of a focus of opposing game plans show that he is a very capable player in a spot role, and that would be exactly what BYU would be bringing him in here for. Yes, he would play off of the likes like of an AJ Dybantsa and a Richie Saunders, but here's the deal. There's a whole lot worse things you can do than spot up in the corner, make threes at a prodigious rate, and also defend on the other end of the court and lead to turnovers and breakouts in terms of fast breaks for points. That's what BYU wants this offense to be, it appears, under Kevin Young. He wants his wing players to be the dominant players. At least it looks like from this juncture on, with AJ Dybantsa and Richie Saunders, kind of your two scoring guys, if Richie Saunders does return, I still have to acknowledge that fact. I'm fully expecting him to at this point. That's just my personal gut feeling on the matter. But should he return and team up with AJ Dybantsa, this is going to be a wing-driven team for BYU. But a guy like Makai Mason would absolutely fit what BYU needs to play off of them. Because as they dribble and drive, well, they're going to get cut off at points. And all you got to be there is you got to be there for that kick out. And you kick out to the corner, kick out to the top of the key. You're going to have opportunities if you're a guy like Makai Mason to improve potential in that 40.2% from three, but also show yourself capable of thriving in an NBA-esque model and show that your size, your length, your athleticism, your shooting prowess is all capable of translating to the next level. That's one of the other things about the Kevin Young system I probably should have referred to earlier today on the podcast, is that he has shown that this is a very translatable offense to the professional level. Yes, a lot of guys have dreams of going to the NBA, but very few ultimately get to live that dream of playing at the top level of basketball internationally. But that doesn't mean there's other opportunities. You can go over to Europe and play in NBA style offenses, and this will show those scouts and coaches that you can thrive in a professional model system. Gone are the days of BYU playing with a big man with the back to the basket. That's just not how BYU is going to play unless they get a dominant big man. I just don't see that happening. And honestly, I don't expect that to be the way that Kevin Young goes about things. He understands that the best teams, or at least what he's experienced in his professional career, the best teams have had guys who can drive and kick, and they have players around them who are able to provide the spacing and also make threes when those players aren't able to make plays at the rim. I look at this and I think Makai Mason fits exactly the model that Kevin Young is building here. Now, you don't want to be all wings, have no depth on the front court, and don't have any ball handlers. I get that BYU needs to get a big man or two and also some ball handlers, especially if a guy like Egor Demin decides to hit the NBA, head up to the NBA draft. And obviously with Dallin Hall exiting the program, yeah, you need a ball handler or two to initiate the offense. But the other thing about it is, AJ Dybantsa is going to initiate plenty of offense in his own right. I wouldn't be surprised that if he plays more of a point forward role for BYU in many respects this year, where if, he does get a rebound, he's initiating the offense and he's bringing the ball up. He is capable of all that. He is, so far as I'm concerned, the total package. And what BYU needs to surround him with is players who, when they step on the court, they elevate BYU's play. And I think what Makai Mason's career has shown so far is, yes, when he's been in a more prominent role, he's produced at a pretty high level, but he also thrives in an off-ball role as well. And if he can replicate that, if he does decide to go to BYU, it's early in the conversation to say that he's going to, but if he does, if he can replicate shooting 40+% from three, BYU will have found another nice option to bring into this program. And crazily enough, he and Dominic Diomande could be Washington Huskies turned BYU Cougars in time. That's the fun part about this. So we'll continue to track these guys as the news comes out on them. And every so often I'll see one that's got a rumor about BYU being involved, and I'll look at it and say, okay, I feel like there is something here about an agent trying to pump up his client by saying that BYU is interested in him or other schools, because it's happening. There are agents out there who are using and invoking teams like BYU's name just to garner extra interest in their players. Because sometimes I've seen some of these out there that the numbers of schools that are reaching out to these kids, a lot of them are G5 programs, and then BYU's thrown in there. And I'm like, hold on. Why is a Power 5 team lumped with G5 teams? But I really do think some of them are trying to juice up interest in their players by invoking the name of BYU. But if you look at the stats sometimes at the same time, say, okay, that's why BYU's interested. And that's where I think Makai Mason fits in here. Because if you can shoot 40% as a volume 3-point shooter in college basketball, there's a need for you in the BYU system, because especially with how the roster appears it's going to be constructed, built around two very potent scorers in AJ Dybantsa and Richie Saunders, you need spot-up shooters, and Makai Mason very well could be that guy that benefits from BYU having a player of his magnitude on this roster. All right, we'll finish up today's show coming up next, and you talk a little BYU football recruiting. Our good friends over at Locked On Ole Miss, as well as Locked On The Portal, two of our great podcasts in the college arm of this network, they had some interesting comments about Ryder Lyons, and they echo some of what I heard over the weekend about the 5-star prospect at a Folsom High School. What are BYU's chances of bringing him in? better than you might think. And we'll talk about that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. Now, Monarch Money is here to be your personal CFO. A lot of us have always checked our bank accounts and wondered, hey, where did all that money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and a bevy of other things that we seem to do with our money, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It gives you full visibility and control over your finances. And the best part is it's not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center, tracking all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. You can stop just managing your money and start building actual wealth. Obviously, all of us want to be ahead in the rat race they call life. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check on your finances, track your spending, and even plan your long-term goals, all while you stay ahead and get ahead of other people out there. So take control of your finances and do it with our friends at Monarch Money and keep that money in your accounts. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, promo code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year at monarchmoney.com. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you all are doing well out there. Just another reminder for you guys, if you've not done so already, join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group and get the inside scoop on all things BYU sports coming to your phone in the form of a text message. Just $5 a month to be a part of the group. But the best part, the kicker, I guess, is you get a 14-day free trial, 2 full weeks before you're charged anything. So join us today on the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right, let's talk about BYU football. Now, Ryder Lyons is continuing to get a lot of national pub out there, and for good reason. He's a 5-star prospect. He is visiting top shelf programs across the country. I was on Locked On College Football this past week with Spencer McLaughlin, and we talked about the fact that if BYU can beat out the likes of Oregon, USC, Ole Miss, Michigan, Ohio State, there is like the who's who of college football chasing this young man. If BYU can beat them all out, as Spencer pointed out, it would kind of point to BYU making a pivot into being an elite recruiter in the college football sphere. Now, over this weekend, I don't remember when the podcast came out. Locked On Ole Miss, of course, and Locked On the Portals, two of our great podcasts here at the Locked On Podcast Network, they were talking about Ryder Lyons and his visit to Ole Miss over the weekend, and they came down to the consensus that if Ryder Lyons had to commit today, they said it would be BYU. He would pick the Cougars at this juncture. And that echoes a lot of what I've heard talking to people over the weekend. A couple of people sent me the link to that podcast and said, Jake, have you heard this? And I listened to the podcast, and Brian and Steven, who do the show, they do a really, really fine job. And they really, I think, broke it down quite well. And they made some good points about what to expect for the process of Ryder Lyons and him deciding where he's going to go. He is reportedly going to visit Ohio State and Michigan in a very short order here. I think it's maybe later this week. But as it stands right now, he has 3 official visits scheduled. Those are coming up in June. They will be to USC, Oregon, and BYU. And currently, BYU is the last of the 3 to have the official visit set. I think it's June 20th. That's going to be a very impactful weekend for BYU to put their best foot forward and maybe have their final pitch to Ryder Lyons and explain to him why they believe that they should be where he plays. The bigger point to be made is BYU is swinging for the fences here, and they are competing very favorably with some of the nation's elite programs, especially elite programs when it comes to developing quarterbacks. Jackson Dart is a prep star from the state of Utah, obviously played at Roy High School before finishing up at Corner Canyon. Well, he went to Ole Miss under Lane Kiffin and just put together a pretty phenomenal career, and there's a large majority of our NFL draft analysts out there that believe that he has worked himself into a place where he will not make it out of the first round of the NFL draft. That's a very compelling pitch to a kid who is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints like Jackson Dart is, to turn around and pitch a guy like Ryder Lyons as to why he should go to the Grove and play for the Rebels and play for Lane Kiffin. That you can say the same thing for what Oregon could do when they pitch him. The same thing for USC. Well, BYU, all they've got to pitch is, okay, look at the pantheon of our quarterbacks going over the past, let's say, 50 years and tell us that we have not had some of the best, if not the best quarterbacks in the game. Yes, I know that Jim McMahon probably doesn't resonate today like, let's say, Jackson Dart does. Let's say Oregon could pitch a guy out there like, I don't know who you want to insert from Oregon. Like BYU's let me get back to the original point. The point is that BYU can point at a track record over 50 years of saying, hey, we've had high-level quarterback play, and when we have had high-level quarterback play, look at the results. It's led us to pretty high heights, and in fact, we won a national championship. That's what BYU's pitch needs to be to Rider Lions, and it's good to hear people who have no affiliation and are separated from BYU by thousands of miles. Brian and Steven, the hosts of Locked on the Portal, speaking of Brian and Steven Willis, who does Locked on Ole Miss, they're both based in Florida. They're thousands upon thousands of miles away from BYU, but they understand what BYU's doing here in terms of why they are in the mix for a guy like Rider Lions. Yes, it helps that he's a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Yes, it helps that he's planning on going on a mission. BYU has a track record working with that, obviously, as this institution sponsored by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The other part of it is that the track record BYU can point to with Rider Lions and say, hey, you're a top shelf quarterback. When we've had top shelf quarterbacks in our system and in our program, and just most recently look at Jake Retzloff and what he did last year, leading BYU to an 11-2 season. The nice part is top shelf quarterbacks come here, they thrive, and more importantly, they win, and they win at a very, very high level. Max Hall, John Beck, Ty Detmer, Steve Young, Robbie Bosco, Gifford Nilsson, Mark Wilson, the list goes on and on and on about these great quarterbacks. Zach Wilson, Jaron Hall. You can go down just a really, really long list. And maybe at some point I need to rank BYU's all-time quarterbacks, but it's a pretty elite list of quarterback play. And Aaron Roderick and the BYU coaching staff led by Kalani Sitake, they've got some very compelling points they can make to a kid like Rider Lions. But I was very intrigued to hear that two of our podcasts on this network who aren't necessarily inclined to be hooting and hollering about BYU believe that the Cougars right now are in the lead for Rider Lions. Is that going to last? It's anybody's guess, because Rider ultimately has to come down and decide where he wants to play. But right now, that's a positive spot to be in for BYU, to be perceived to be the leader in his recruitment, because that means the BYU's made a very positive impression. He visited BYU during spring camp on an unofficial visit, and he was hanging out with some of the other top prospects in this recruiting class that BYU's chasing, most notably a guy like Brock Harris, who's going to announce his commitment later this afternoon. If you missed it, 2:30 Mountain Time. If you want to tune in, he'll be doing it at his high school down there at Pineview in St. George, Utah. But there's a lot to like about the noise that BYU's making on the recruiting front, both in basketball and football right now. And I think getting a guy like Rider Lions to commit to BYU football, it's not the same level of commitment as an AJ Dybantsa is, because he's not the top-rated player overall in the recruiting class, but he's a top-shelf quarterback and would, I think, make a lot of people sit up a little straighter and say, hey, what's BYU doing here? They're continuing to win on the recruiting trail. And that's what you want to do if you're BYU. You want to win, and you want to win at a high level. You need top shelf talent, and Rider Lions appears to be just that. And I'm hopeful that BYU can win this recruiting battle and bring him in, because I really think he's got the goods that could help elevate BYU for a long, long run here in the Big 12 Conference. So we'll track it all, obviously. It sounds like he's going to make a decision before too long, but I'd be very surprised if that decision comes before he makes those official visits in June. But hey, maybe he comes out to BYU in late June and the very next week, or maybe the day after he gets home, commits to the BYU Cougars and sets the recruiting world on fire by picking BYU. I hope it all comes to fruition, but I really was intrigued to hear what Locked on the Portal and Locked on Ole Miss said. And like I said, talking to people, trying to get some clarification on it that I trust, they say that that's kind of where BYU sits right now, where they are considered to be one of, if not the favorite, for Rider Lions. All right, that's going to do it for today's edition of the podcast. As always, thank you for all y'all's support. Please continue to subscribe, rate, review, share it with your family and friends. Do all the things to help this audience grow. It's cool to see the interaction and the growth we are seeing with the podcast, and it's all due to you. So thank you for your support. As always, thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And once again, thank you for being an everydayer right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.